I've always had a fascination with haunted houses, so when my girlfriend Emily suggested we visit a new attraction called the Dollhouse, I was all in. The place was set up in an old Victorian mansion, and the theme revolved around creepy dolls and marionettes. It sounded perfect for a night of scares. We arrived just as the sun was setting, and the mansion looked suitably spooky, with dim lights casting long shadows across the lawn. We bought our tickets and entered, greeted by an actor dressed as a sinister dollmaker. "Welcome to the Dollhouse," he said, his voice low and eerie. "Be careful not to become part of the collection." We laughed nervously and followed the path through the house. The rooms were filled with life-size dolls and marionettes, some sitting in rocking chairs, others hanging from the ceiling. Their glassy eyes seemed to follow us as we moved. As we ventured deeper into the house, the atmosphere grew more unsettling. The dolls became more lifelike, their expressions more sinister. In one room, we found a large, ornate dollhouse that was an exact replica of the mansion. "This is incredible," Emily said, peering inside the tiny windows. "Look, there are little dolls of us in here." I looked closer and felt a chill run down my spine. She was right. There were 2 tiny dolls inside the dollhouse, dressed exactly like us. "That's creepy," I said, trying to laugh it off. We continued through the mansion, but I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. In one room, we found a large wooden chest. Curiosity got the better of us, and we opened it. Inside were dozens of tiny handmade dolls, each one unique and incredibly detailed. Suddenly, the door to the room slammed shut, and the lights flickered. We heard the sound of soft footsteps and the creaking of floorboards. "Hello?" Emily called out, but there was no response. We tried to open the door, but it was locked. Panic set in as the footsteps grew louder, and we saw shadows moving outside the window. The dolls in the room seemed to come to life, their heads turning to watch us. "We need to get out of here," I said, pulling Emily towards the window. We managed to open it and climbed out, dropping to the ground below. We ran through the garden and didn't stop until we reached the safety of our car. As we drove away, I glanced back at the mansion and saw the doll maker watching us from the window, a sinister smile on his face. We never went back to the dollhouse, and I still get chills thinking about that night. A few weeks later, I found a small handmade doll on my doorstep. It looked just like me, down to the clothes I had been wearing that night. I don't know how it got there, but I keep it locked away, afraid that it might come to life and continue the nightmare we experienced in the dollhouse. My friends and I love a good scare, so when we heard about the new haunted house attraction called the Mirror Maze, we knew we had to check it out. The place was known for its elaborate setups and spine-chilling scares, and we were excited to see if it lived up to the hype. The house was set up in an old mansion, and as we entered, we were greeted by a host dressed as a Victorian-era ghost. She handed us each a small flashlight and warned us to stay together. "The mirrors can be disorienting," she said with a smile, "but that's all part of the fun." We entered the maze, and it was immediately clear why it was called the Mirror Maze. The walls were lined with mirrors of all shapes and sizes, reflecting our images back at us from every angle. It was like stepping into a funhouse, but with an eerie, unsettling twist. We navigated the maze, laughing and screaming, as we encountered various scares, actors dressed as ghosts and ghouls jumping out at us, creepy sound effects echoing through the corridors, and the occasional sudden drop in temperature that made our skin prickle. As we went deeper into the maze, the mirrors became more warped and distorted, making it harder to tell where we were going. We reached a large room filled with floor-to-ceiling mirrors, and it was here that things took a turn for the worse. I was the first to notice it. "Hey guys, look at this," I said, pointing to one of the mirrors. In the reflection, there was an extra figure standing behind us, a tall, shadowy figure with glowing eyes. We all turned around, but there was no one there. "Must be a trick mirror," Tom said, trying to sound confident. But as we continued through the room, the figure appeared in every mirror, always just a few steps behind us. It felt like we were being watched, and the sense of unease grew stronger with each passing minute. "Let's get out of here," Sarah suggested, her voice trembling. We hurried through the maze, but the mirrors seemed to close in around us, distorting our reflections and making it impossible to find the exit. The shadowy figure followed us, its glowing eyes never leaving us. Finally, we found a door that led out of the maze and into a dark, narrow hallway. We were relieved to be out of the mirrors, but the feeling of being watched persisted. As we walked down the hallway, we heard soft, whispering voices and the sound of footsteps behind us. We reached the end of the hallway and found ourselves back in the main lobby of the mansion. The host greeted us with a smile. "Did you enjoy the maze?" We nodded, too shaken to speak. We left the mansion and vowed never to return. But the experience stayed with us. Sometimes when I look in the mirror, I catch a glimpse of that shadowy figure with the glowing eyes, and I wonder if it's still following us, waiting for the next time we dare to enter the mirror maze. Last Halloween, my boyfriend Eric and I decided to visit a haunted house attraction that was set up in an abandoned asylum. The place was notorious for being one of the scariest attractions in the state, and we were eager to see if it lived up to its reputation. We arrived at the asylum just as the sun was setting, and the sight of the crumbling building sent shivers down my spine. The entrance was decorated with fake cobwebs and skeletons, and eerie music played in the background. We bought our tickets and joined a group of other thrill seekers. Our guide was a woman dressed as a deranged nurse, and she led us through the asylum, telling us stories of the patients who had once been confined there. The place was filled with creepy props and actors who jumped out at us from the shadows. It was all in good fun until we reached the children's ward. The room was filled with old, dusty toys and cribs. In the center of the room was a large glass case containing a porcelain doll. The doll had dark, curly hair and eyes that seemed to follow us as we moved. "This is Annabelle," the guide said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Legend has it that she belonged to a little girl who died here. It's said that her spirit now haunts the doll." I felt a chill run down my spine as I stared at the doll. There was something unsettling about it, something that made my skin crawl. Eric, on the other hand, was fascinated. "Can we get a closer look?" he asked. The guide nodded and we approached the glass case. As we did, the temperature in the room seemed to drop, and I could swear I heard faint whispers. Eric leaned in to get a better look at the doll, and suddenly the glass case shattered. We both jumped back in shock, and the guide quickly ushered us out of the room, apologizing for the incident. We continued the tour, but I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. Every now and then, I would catch a glimpse of something moving out of the corner of my eye. But when I turned to look, there was nothing there. After we left the asylum, strange things started happening. Eric began having nightmares about the doll, and he would wake up in the middle of the night screaming. Objects in our apartment would move on their own, and we would hear footsteps and whispers when we were alone. Desperate for answers, we contacted a paranormal investigator. She came to our apartment and conducted a seance. As soon as she began, the room grew cold, and the lights flickered. "The spirit of the girl is attached to the doll," she said. "You must return it to the asylum." We were stunned. "But we didn't take the doll," I said. The investigator shook her head. "It doesn't matter. The spirit has latched onto you. You must go back." Reluctantly, we returned to the asylum. The staff was surprised to see us, but they allowed us back into the children's ward. We placed a new glass case over the doll and left as quickly as we could. After that, the strange occurrences stopped and Eric's nightmares ceased. But I still feel a chill whenever I think about that doll in the haunted asylum. I can't help but wonder if the spirit of the little girl is still there, trapped in that porcelain doll, waiting for her next victim. I've always loved Halloween, and haunted house attractions are my favorite part of the season. This year I decided to visit the infamous Blackwood Manor, a haunted house that was known for its terrifying realism. I went with my best friend Karen, who was just as excited as I was. As we approached the mansion, we were greeted by an actor dressed as a creepy butler. "Welcome to Blackwood Manor," he said with a sinister grin. "I will be your guide for the evening." We followed him inside, and the door slammed shut behind us, plunging us into darkness. The butler led us through a series of rooms, each more terrifying than the last. He told us the history of the house, how it was built in the 1800s, and had been the site of numerous tragic deaths. The realism was incredible. At one point, we walked through a room filled with old, dusty furniture and a large, ornate mirror. As we passed by, I noticed that our reflections were delayed, moving a second or two after we did. It sent chills down my spine. We continued through the house, and the butler never left our side. He seemed to take a sadistic pleasure in our fear, his grin growing wider with each scream. But then something strange happened. As we entered the basement, he suddenly stopped and turned to us. "You must leave this place," he said in a low, urgent voice. "It's not safe here." Karen and I exchanged confused looks. "Is this part of the act?" she asked. The butler shook his head. "No, you don't understand. This house is truly haunted. I am a spirit trapped here, forced to guide visitors through this nightmare. You need to leave before it's too late." His eyes were filled with genuine fear, and I felt a cold dread settle in my stomach. "How do we get out?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Follow me," he said, leading us back the way we had come. But the house seemed to change around us, the corridors twisting and turning, making it impossible to find our way out. The whispers grew louder, and we felt cold hands brushing against our skin. Finally, we reached the front door, and the butler pushed it open. "Go now," he urged us. We ran outside, gasping for breath. When we turned back, the door was closed, and the butler was gone. We hurried to the staff at the entrance and told them what had happened, but they assured us that there was no actor playing a butler that night. Confused and shaken, we left Blackwood Manor. I later did some research and discovered that the mansion's original butler had died under mysterious circumstances. His ghost was said to haunt the house, trying to warn visitors of the dangers within. I haven't been back to Blackwood Manor since, and I doubt I ever will. But I can't forget the fear in the butler's eyes and the urgency in his voice. Sometimes I wonder if he's still there, guiding unsuspecting visitors through the haunted halls, trying to save them from the same fate that trapped him. It was a cool autumn evening when my friends and I decided to visit the new haunted house attraction that had just opened on the outskirts of town. The place was getting rave reviews, and we were eager to see if it lived up to the hype. There were 4 of us, me, Tom, Sarah, and my roommate Jake. We bought our tickets and entered the house, laughing nervously as we crossed the threshold. The place was dark and filled with eerie sounds, creaking floorboards, distant screams, and whispers that seemed to come from the walls themselves. It was everything you'd expect from a haunted house, but there was something about it that felt off. As we moved deeper into the house, we came across a narrow corridor lined with old faded portraits. The eyes of the people in the paintings seemed to follow us as we walked by. We reached a fork in the path, and the sign above read, "Choose your fate." Jake, always the adventurous one, decided to go left. "I'll meet you guys at the end," he said with a grin. "Let's see if this place can really scare me." The rest of us took the right path, which led us through a series of creepy rooms. A room filled with mannequins, a cobweb-covered library, and a blood-splattered kitchen. Each room was more terrifying than the last, but we were having fun, screaming and laughing together. When we finally reached the exit, we waited for Jake. Minutes passed, but he didn't show up. "Maybe he got lost," Sarah suggested. We decided to go back inside and find him. We retraced our steps, calling out his name, but there was no response. We returned to the fork in the path and took the left turn, but the corridor seemed different. It was longer, darker, and the portraits on the walls had changed. The faces were now twisted in expressions of horror and pain. We finally reached the end of the corridor and found a small, dimly lit room. In the center was a chair, and on it sat Jake's jacket and phone. But there was no sign of Jake. Panic set in as we searched the room, but it was empty. We ran to the nearest staff member and told them what had happened. They assured us that it was all part of the attraction, a way to make the experience more immersive. Your friend is probably waiting for you at the front, they said with a smile. But when we got back outside, Jake was nowhere to be found. We called his phone, but it went straight to voicemail. We waited for hours, but he never showed up. The police were called and a search was conducted, but Jake was never found. The haunted house was shut down for investigation, but nothing came of it. It was as if he had vanished into thin air. To this day, I can't shake the feeling that the haunted house was more than just an attraction. I still hear the whispers in my nightmares, and sometimes I think I see Jake's face in the shadows begging for help.